Letters of Swami Vivekananda, the new edition in 4 volumes.
Letter number 242, addressed to Raja Ajit Singh of Khetri. Reply to Khetri address. Footnote: Swamiji received the following handwritten address from Raja Ajit Singh of Khetri, which reads in full. Khetri, Rajputana, India, 4th March 1895. My dear Swamiji, as the head of this darbar, a formal stately assemblage, held today for this special purpose, I have much pleasure in conveying to you, in my own name and that of my subjects, the heartfelt thanks of this state for your worthy representation of Hinduism at the Parliament of Religions held at Chicago in America. I don't think the general principles of Hinduism could be expressed more accurately and clearly in English than that you have done, with all the restrictions imposed by the very natural shortcomings of language itself. The manner in which the influence of your speech and behavior in foreign land is not only spread with a sense of admiration among men of countries and religions different, but has also served to familiarize you with them to help in the furtherance of your unselfish cause, is very highly and inexpressibly appreciated by us all, and we feel to be failing in our duty. Were I not to write to you formally at least these few lines expressing our sincere gratitude for all the trouble you have taken in going to foreign countries and to expound in American Parliament of Religions the truths of our ancient religion, which we ever since hold so dear. It is certainly applicable to the pride of India that it has been fortunate in possessing the privilege of having secured so able a representation as yourself. Thanks are also due to those noble souls whose efforts succeeded in organizing the Parliament of Religions and who accorded to you a very enthusiastic reception. As you are quite a foreigner in that continent, their kind treatment to you is due to their love of the several qualifications you possess, and this speaks highly of their noble nature. I herewith enclose 20 printed copies of this letter and have to request that, keeping this with yourself, you will kindly distribute the other copies among your friends. With best regards, I remain yours very sincerely, Raja Ajit Singh, Bahadur of Khetri. Care of Mr. Francis Leggett, Ridgely Manor, New York, mid-April 1895. Your Highness, whenever virtue subsides and wickedness raises its head, I manifest myself to restore the glory of religion, are the words, noble prince, of the Eternal One in the Holy Gita. Footnote. See Gita 4.7 and 4.8. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyutthanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham परित्राणाय साधूनां विनाशाय च दुष्कृतां धर्म संस्थापनार्थाय संभवामि युगे युगे. Footnote ends. Striking the keynote of the pulsating ebb and flow of the spiritual energy in the universe. These changes are manifesting themselves again and again in rhythms peculiar to themselves, and like every other massive change, though affecting more or less every particle within its sphere of action, show their effect more intensely upon those particles which are naturally susceptible to their power. As in a universal sense, the primal state is a state of sameness of the qualitative forces, and a disturbance of this equilibrium and all the succeeding struggles to regain it compose what we call the manifestation of nature, this universe, which state of things remains so long the primitive sameness is not reached. So, in a restricted sense, on our own earth, this differentiation and its inevitable counterpart, this struggle towards homogeneity, must remain so long as the human race will remain as such, creating strongly marked peculiarities between ethnic divisions, sub-races, even down to the individuals in all parts of the world. In this world of impartial division and balance, therefore, each nation represents, as it were, a wonderful dynamo for the storage and distribution of a particular species of energy, and amidst all other possessions, that particular property shines forth as the special characteristic of that race. And as any upheaval in any particular part of human nature, though affecting others more or less, stirs up that nation of which it is an especial characteristic to its very depth, and from which it generally starts as a center. Any commotion in the religious atmosphere of the world is sure to produce momentous changes in India, which has, again and again, had to furnish the center for widespread religious upheavals. For above all, India is the land of religions. Each man calls that alone real, which helps him realize his ideal. To the worldly minded, everything that can be converted into money is real. That which cannot be is unreal. To the man of domineering spirit, anything that will conduce to his ambition of ruling over his fellow men is real. The rest is not. And man finds nothing in that which does not echo back the heartbeats of his special love in life. Those whose aim is to barter the energies of life for gold or name or any other enjoyments. Those to whom the tramp of embattled cohorts is the only manifestation of power. Those to whom the enjoyments of the senses are the only bliss that life can give. To them, India will ever appear as an immense desert where every blast is deadly to the development of life as it is known to them. But to those whose thirst for life has been quenched forever by drinking from the stream of immortality that flows from far away beyond the world of the senses, whose souls have cast away, as a serpent its scales, the threefold bondages of lust, gold, and fame, who look from their height of calmness upon the petty quarrels and jealousies and fights for little gilded puffballs filled with sawdust called enjoyments of those under bondage, with love and complacence, whose accumulated force of past good deeds has caused these scales of ignorance to fall off from their eyes, and making them see through the vanity of name and form. To such, wheresoever they be, India, the motherland and eternal mine of spirituality, stands transfigured, a beacon of hope to everyone in search of Him, who is the only real existence in a universe of vanishing shadows. The majority of mankind can only understand power when it is presented to them in a concrete form, fitted to their perceptions. To them, the rush and excitement of war, with its power and spoil, is something very tangible. And any manifestation of life that does not come like a whirlwind, peering down everything before it, is to them as death. And India, for centuries at the feet of foreign conquerors, without any idea or hope of resistance, without the least solidarity amongst its masses, without the least idea of patriotism, must needs appear to such as a land of rotten bones, a lifeless, putrescent mass. They say the fittest alone survive. How is it then that this most unfitted of all the races, as they will have it, could bear the most awful misfortunes that ever befall a race, and yet not show the least signs of decay? How is it, while the multiplying power of the so-called vigorous and active races are dwindling down every day, the immoral Hindu shows a power of increase beyond them all? Great laurels are due, no doubt, to those who can deluge the world with blood at a moment's notice. Great indeed is the glory of those who, to keep up a population of a few millions in plenty, have to starve half the population of the earth. But is no credit due to those who can keep hundreds of millions in peace and plenty without snatching the bread away from the mouth of anyone else? Is there no power displayed in bringing up and guiding the destinies of countless millions of human beings through hundreds of centuries with the least violence to others? The mythologies of all ancient races supply us with the fables of heroes whose life was concentrated in a certain small portion of their bodies, and until that was touched, they were invulnerable. Well, it seems as if each nation has got such a peculiar center of life, and as long as that remains untouched, no amount of misery and misfortune can destroy it. In religion lies the vitality of India, and as long as the Hindu race do not forget the great inheritance of their forefathers, there is no power on earth to destroy them. Nowadays, everybody blames those who constantly look back to their past. It is said that so much looking back to the past is the cause of all India's woes. To me, on the contrary, it seems that the opposite is true. So long as they forgot the past, the Hindu nation remained in a state of stupor. And as soon as they have begun to look back into their past, there is on every side a fresh manifestation of life. It is out of this past that the future has to be molded. this past will become the future. The more, therefore, the Hindus will study the past, the more glorious will be the future. And whosoever tries to bring the past to the door of everyone is a great benefactor to his nation. The degeneration in India came not because the laws and the customs of the ancients were bad, but because they were not allowed to be carried to their logical conclusions. Every critical student knows that the social laws in India have always undergone great periodic changes. At their inception, these laws were the embodiment of a gigantic plan, which was to unfold itself slowly through time. The great seers of ancient India saw so far ahead of their time that the world has to wait centuries yet to appreciate their wisdom. And it is the very inability to appreciate the full scope of their wonderful social plan by their own descendants which is the one and only cause of the degeneration of India. Ancient India had for centuries been the battlefield for the ambitious projects of two of her foremost classes, the Brahmanas and the Kshatriyas. On the one hand, the priesthood stood between the lawless social tyranny of the princes and the masses, whom the Kshatras declared to be their legal food. On the other hand, the Kshatra power was the one potent force which struggled with any success against the spiritual tyranny of the priests and the ever increasing chain of ceremonials which they were forging to bind the people down. The Brahmana was par excellence the Karmi, the Kshatra the teacher of Jnana. The tug of war began in the earliest periods of the history of our race, and throughout the Shrutis it can be distinctly traced. A momentary lull came when Sri Krishna, leading the faction of Kshatra power and Jnana, showed the way of reconciliation. The result was the teachings of the Gita, the essence of philosophy, of religion, and of liberality. Yet the causes were there and the effect must come. The ambition of the two classes to be the masters of the poor and the ignorant was there, and the strife became once more fierce. The meager literature that has come down to us of that period brings to us but faint echoes of that mighty strife. But at last it broke out as a victory for the Kshatras, a victory for Jnana, for liberality. And ceremonial had to go down, much of it, never to come back to the surface. This upheaval is what is known as the Buddhistic Reformation. On the religious side, it represented freedom from ceremonials. On the political side, overthrow of the priesthood by the Kshatras. It is a significant fact that the two greatest men ancient India produced were both Kshatras, Krishna and Buddha. And still more is significant the fact that both of these gods threw open the doors of knowledge to everyone, irrespective of sex or birth. But in spite of its wonderful moral strength, Buddhism was extremely iconoclastic, and much of its force being spent in negative attempts, it had to die out in the land of its birth. And what remained of it was full of superstitions and ceremonials, 100 times cruder than that it intended to suppress. Though it partially succeeded in suppressing the animal sacrifices of the Vedas, it filled the land with temples and images, symbols, and bones of saints. And above all, in the medley of Aryans, Mongols, and Aborigines which it created, it unconsciously led the way to some of the hideous Vamacharas. Footnote: literally meaning left-handed practices, refers to certain tantric rituals that involve the consumption of intoxicants and sex. Footnote ends. And this was especially the reason why this travesty of the teachings of the great master Buddha had to be driven out of India by Sri Shankara and his band of sannyasins. Thus, even the current of life, set in motion by the greatest soul that ever wore a human form, the Bhagwan Buddha himself, became a miasmatic pool, and India had to wait for centuries till Shankara arose, following in quick succession by Ramanuja and Madhva. But an entirely new chapter had opened by this time in the history of India. The ancient Kshatras and Brahmanas had disappeared. The land between the Himalaya and the Vindhyas, the home of the Aryas, the land which gave birth to Krishna and Buddha, the cradle of great Rajarshis and Brahmarshis, had become silent. And from the very farther end of the Indian peninsula from races alien in speech and form. Races never regarded by the old Aryans as capable of any great achievement. From families claiming descent from the ancient Brahmanas came the reaction against corrupted Buddhism. What had become of the Aryan Brahmanas and Kshatras of Aryavarta? They had entirely disappeared, except a few mongrel clans claiming to be Brahmanas and Kshatras here and there. And in spite of their inflated self laudatory assertions that the whole world ought to learn from. एतदुद्देश्य प्रसुतस्य सकाशादग्रजन्मनः. Footnote Manusmriti 2.20. एतदुद्देश्य प्रसुतस्य सकाशाद् अग्रजन्मनः स्वं स्वं चरित्रं शिक्षेरन् पृथिव्यां सर्वमानवाः. That is, all the people in the world should learn their own manners and customs from Brahmins born in places just mentioned. Footnote ends. They had to sit before the people of South in sackcloth and ashes, in all humility to learn. The result was the bringing back of the Vedas to India, a revival of the Vedanta which India never saw before, and even the householders began to study the Aranyakas. The Kshatras were the real leaders in the Buddhistic movement, and whole masses of them became Buddhists. And in the zeal of reform and conversion, the popular dialects were almost exclusively cultivated to the neglect of Sanskrit, and the greatest portion of the Kshatriyas had become disjoined from the Vedic literature and Sanskrit learning. Thus, this wave of reform, which came from the south, benefited to a certain extent the priesthood and the priests only. For the rest of Indian humanity, it forged more chains than they had ever known before. The Kshatra has always been, O Prince, the backbone of India. They had been the supporters of science and liberty. Their voice was ringing again and again to clear the land from superstitions, and they formed throughout the history of India the invulnerable barrier to aggressive priestly tyranny. When the greater part of them sank into ignorance, and another portion mixed their blood with the savages from Central Asia, and lent their swords to establish the rule of priests in India, the cup became full to the brim, and down sank the land of Bharat, never to rise again, until the Kshatra rouses himself and, making himself free, strikes the chains from the feet of the rest. Priestcraft is the bane of India. Can anyone degrade his brother and himself escape degradation? No, Rajaji. The greatest of all truths discovered by your ancestors, that the universe is one. Can one injure any without injuring himself? The mass of Brahmin and Kshatriya tyranny has recoiled upon their own heads with compound interest. And 1,000 years of slavery and degradation is what the inexorable law of karma visiting them with. This is what one of your ancestors, Sri Krishna, said. Even in this life, they have gained heaven, whose mind is fixed on sameness. Footnote See Gita 5.19. Ihaiva tarjita sargo yesham samme sthitam manaha. Nirdosham hi samam brahma tasmad brahmani te sthitaha. Footnote ends. He is believed to be God incarnate. We all do. Are his words vain then and without meaning? If not, and we know they are not, any attempt against this perfect equality of all creation, irrespective of sex or birth or even qualification, is a terrible mistake, and no one can be saved until he has attained to this idea of sameness. Follow, noble prince, therefore, the teachings of the Vedanta, not as explained by this or that commentator, but what the Lord within you understands. Follow, above all, this great doctrine of sameness through all beings, seeing the same God in all. This is the way to freedom, inequality the way to bondage. No man nor a nation can attain to physical freedom without physical equality, nor mental freedom without mental equality. Ignorance, inequality, and desire are the three causes of human misery, and each follows the other in inevitable union. Why should a man think himself above any other man or an animal even? It is the same throughout. Tvam stri, tvam pumanasi, tvam kumar utava kumari. Thou art the man, thou art the woman, thou art the young man, thou art the young woman. Footnote. This is from Shveta Shvetara Upanishad, chapter 4, mantra 3. Footnote ends. Many will say that is all right for the sannyasis, but we are householders. No doubt, a householder having many other duties to perform cannot as fully attain to this sameness. Yet, this should also be their ideal. For it is the ideal of all societies, all mankind, all animals, and all nature to attain to this sameness. But alas, they think that inequality is the way to attain equality, as if they will come to right by doing wrong. This is the bane of human nature, the curse upon mankind, the root of all misery, this inequality. This is the source of all bondage, of all misery, physical, mental, and spiritual. Samam pashyan hi sarvatra samavasthitam ishwaram na hinastyatmanatmanam tato yati param gatim. That is from Gita 13.28. Seeing the equally present to all Lord, same everywhere, he does not hurt self by self, and thus goes to the highest goal. This one line contains the universal way to salvation in few words. You Rajputs have been the glories of ancient India. With your degradation came national decay, and India can only be raised if the descendants of the Kshatras cooperate with the descendants of the Brahmanas, not to share the spoils of pelf and power, but to help the weak, to enlighten the ignorant, and restore the glory of the holy land of their forefathers. And who can say but that the times are propitious? Once more the wheel is turning up. Once more the vibrations have set in motion from India, which are destined at no distant time to reach the farthest limits of the earth. One voice has spoken, whose echoes are rolling on and gathering strength every day, a voice even mightier than those that have preceded it, for it is the summation of all. Once more the voice that spoke to the sages on the banks of the Saraswati, whose echoes reverberated from peak to peak of the father of mountains and descended upon the plains through Krishna, Buddha, Shankara, and Chaitanya in all carrying floods, has spoken again. Once more the doors have opened. Enter ye into the realms of light. The gates have opened wide once more. And you, my beloved prince, you are the scion of a race who are the living pillars upon which rests the eternal religion eternal, its sworn defenders and helpers, the descendants of Ram and Krishna. Will you remain away? I know it cannot be. Yours, I am sure, will be the first hands that will be stretched forth to help religion once more. And when I think of you, Raja Ajit Singh, one in whom the well known scientific attainments of your house have been joined to a purity of character of which a saint ought to be proud, and to an unbounded love for humanity, I cannot help believing in the glorious renaissance of the religion eternal, when such hands are willing to rebuild it again. May the blessings of Ramakrishna be on you and yours forever and ever. And may you live long for the good of many and for the spread of truth, is the constant prayer of Vivekananda. Om Tat Sat.